Chapter 10. An Unexpected Message, an Unexpected Arrival. Catherine Ariel Burgess, you're a fool. The image in the mirror didn't seem inclined to answer the accusation. Ariel scowled at herself and slapped at the contact. The mirror dissolved in a shimmering crystalline haze that was replaced by a pastoral sunset scene that only made her more angry, reminding her of the acrimonious morning a week ago. She told herself that Derek would wait, that he'd still be there when she came back from her long walk. But he hadn't waited. When she'd finally cooled down and called the house in mid-afternoon, Balzac, the household robot, had informed her that Derek and Mandelbrot had left for the port several hours before. Ariel had called the port, wondering what she'd say if he was still there, rehearsing the lines in her mind. "I've changed my mind, Derek. I want to go with you." But he'd already gone, and she had no idea where it was he was heading. Ariel didn't know whether that made her angry or sad or both at the same time. She simply felt confused. The intervening days hadn't made things any better. Sleeping alone each night was too vivid a reminder. She came out of the personal, wandering aimlessly through the rooms that now seemed far too large and empty. She stared at the windows, fiddling with the reader, flicked the holovid, and as quickly turned it off again. With a start, she noticed that the computer terminal was blinking. Feeling a sudden surge of hope, she started to press the access key. Stopped. "Balzac?" she called. The robot trundled from its wall niche in the next room. "Mistress?" it said in a flat, mechanical voice. Balzac was utility model, unsophisticated and plain. "The message on the terminal. Why didn't you answer the call?" "I monitored the message. It was for Derek and did not demand a reply." "Who is it from?" "Who is imprecise in this case. The message was a faint relay from a central computer system." Ariel's lips pressed together. She inhaled slowly, thinking. "Thank you, Balzac. That's all I require." The robot nodded and left the room. Ariel waited until it was gone and the house was silent again, then spoke her code word to the terminal. Euler, the name of one of the supervisor robots in Robot City. Nothing happened. She wrinkled her nose. She knew Derek's code word as well. He made no attempt to keep it a secret from her. "Aranimus," she said. A foil screen scrolled open. Glowing letters flickered across it as Ariel leaned closer. The message was short and succinct. "City under attack by non-humans. Imperative we receive outside aid." The message was followed by a sequence of coordinate numbers for the location. Ariel smiled. "Okay, Derek," she said to the screen. "If the mountain is run away from Mohammed, Mohammed will chase it. Won't you be surprised when I show up?" She turned away from the computer, suddenly excited. This would serve him right. "Balzac!" she called. "I need you to make some arrangements." Mandelbrot. The robot city has to be somewhere on that large continent there. See where the two rivers meet in the forested area? The computer says that's where the last message was waved from. Mandelbrot, at the controls of the craft, punched in coordinates. "Have you been able to get the city's central computer to respond?" "No," Derek admitted glumly. "Either I'm not doing something right, or the chemvets only give me access to the original Robot City's computer. Before, all I had to do was think a message and it went through. This central won't talk to me, or the original Robot City computer. It's just beaming out the distress call at regular intervals." "Then it must be expecting someone to answer. Otherwise, why signal at all?" "I don't know. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm just as puzzled as you are." Derek watched the long curve of the world flatten as they approached. It was a pretty world, he decided. He might have chosen it himself. It seemed a calm and gentle place, much like Aurora, though he could see the spiraling arms of a storm just touching the eastern shores of the continent below, and he knew that underneath the pastel white blue would be dark, streaking clouds and raging winds. Untamed this world was, which was very unlike Aurora, and very much like Ariel. The thought crossed his mind unbidden. She'd not sent any messages to him after she'd stormed out of the house. In fact, she disappeared entirely. He made calls to a few places, trying to find her before they left, but to no avail. She seemed to have dropped from sight. It had been very hard to leave without saying goodbye, and because he knew that was exactly the effect she'd been after, he'd gone. He'd begun to wonder if she'd be there when he came back. And there was a sullen ache in himself at the image of an empty house. That was going to hurt. It was going to hurt more than he wanted to think about. To take his mind off Ariel, he reached in front of Mandelbrot and toggled the switch to bring the world closer into focus. Unbroken treetops swayed in a light wind. "I don't see any evidence of a city," he said. "If we weren't looking specifically for it because of the signal, I'd swear this place was barren of any technology. It has to be there, though. If so, it sure hasn't spread out as much as the original. Have you seen any evidence of other life, Mandelbrot?" "No, Derek. The outside Umbra shows no obvious large habitations, which would be lighted, I would think, though we haven't seen this continent at night yet. The atmospheric sampling does indicate a small amount of industrial waste, which is very likely the result of your city. You remember the effect the other one had on its environment?" Derek did. The massive, out-of-control building spree of the first robot city had resulted in immense ecological side effects. The horrendous deluges that daily inundated the city had nearly killed both him and Ariel until he reprogrammed the central computer. "Yes," he said, "I remember. I hope this one keeps a better handle on things. Take us down. Let's see what's going on." "Derek, I advise against landing in the city itself, assuming we can even find it." "Why not, Mandelbrot?" The robot's eyes gleamed as they turned to him. "We do not know what kind of attack the city is facing," he said. "I have checked for other ships in orbit and found nothing. But I am still concerned that a city under attack will have defenses against ships. You cannot communicate with the central computer. Given that, I would be afraid that it might deem an unidentified ship an enemy, and take measures to protect itself." Derek grimaced. "If you order me to do so," Mandelbrot continued, "I will trust your better judgment and follow your orders." Derek shook his head. And you'll say I told you so afterward." "No." The flat delivery almost sounded hurt. "Okay," Derek said, grinning. "I think you're right. Let's land elsewhere. How much of a hike were you planning on giving us?" "I've estimated that 50 kilometers is the minimum." "Fine. A few days' stroll through the forest." At that moment the craft shook like a mad thing. As the hull shuddered, Derek felt Mandelbrot's firm grip on his arm, guiding him to his seat, and forced him down. The crash webbing slid over him as the craft tumbled. Mandelbrot staggered back to his seat and fought the controls. "What happened?" Derek shouted. "I do not know. Our orbit is decaying rapidly." The robot had no time to say any more as the ship's view of the world below spun and whirled. Mandelbrot's robotic reflexes were far faster than Derek's, but the power to their main engine was simply gone. Using the attitude jets, Mandelbrot managed to reduce the wild tumbling momentarily, but then the first tendrils of the atmosphere touched them, and the hull struts moaned in agony. The ships began to do gymnastics again, and this time, snared in the planet's gravity well, they were flung violently with it. Derek's head slammed up against his seat, despite the webbing, making him shout in pain. Mandelbrot had cut all of the automatics, giving him full control of the ship, but it was little help. In the view screen they saw the hull turning cherry red. The heat was suffocating in the cabin, the ventilation system gone. White cloud tops seemed to race toward them, then they plunged into the columns of gray muck. Storm winds tossed them, rain sheeted across the screen. "Mandelbrot!" Derek's screams shivered with the vibrations of the ship. There was no answer. They plunged out of the bottom of the storm, the murky landscape below wheeling like a mad carousel. The ground, a fist waiting to crumple them like paper, rushed at them. Then, like the gut-wrenching end of a roller coaster's free fall, Derek was shoved down in his seat as the craft pulled up in a quick loop. For a moment Derek thought Mandelbrot had saved them, but it was still too late. The trailing burn of the engines caught the lip of a rocky outcropping. The granite blade of the hill stripped into the supports. Metal and stone screeched. Derek heard the concussion as the engine exploded. Snared, the ship itself was hammered to the ground. The inferno of the engine was sheared completely off and went spiraling away. At least I won't burn to death. As a last thought, it seemed a strange comfort. Chapter 11. Strategy and Tactics. Silverside brought the pack to a ragged halt at a ridge looking down into the shadow bowl of a valley, perhaps a kilometre wide at its lowest point. She sat in the shadows of the last few trees. Life-Crier and Kenai came forward and sat on their haunches to either side of the new leader. Smallface was high in the sky. Largeface had yet to rise. The stars, the Void Eyes, as Life-Crier called them, stared down at the city and marveled. Silverside felt some of that awe herself. The hill of stars, set like a glistening diamond in the center of the valley, and rising well above the level of the surrounding hills, was a fantastic pattern of glowing lights. The slender, pyramidal structure mocked the glory of the night sky. Nor was the hill of stars all. Other buildings spread out around it in geometric splendor. A procession of hard, crystal-lined shapes filled the valley, and spilling out its open end, all linked by ribbons of walkways. And everywhere there were walking stones, all different sizes, all different builds, all different colors. They bustled along the walkways, gazed from the windows of the buildings, slid busily between the flanks of the city. There were thousands of them. They moved in an eerie, almost mystical silence, at least to the kin. But Silverside could hear the deafening roar of the city voices inside her head. An eternal chatter of orders and instructions came from the central computer. Reports were constantly being funneled back to that source. And she understood the words, for they spoke as the hunter spoke, in that language Silverside guessed must be that of the void where the gods lived. It was more proof that the old mother was being opposed. "They began with the Isle of Stars," Kenai whispered to Silverside. She panted at the remembrance, and her long furless tail lashed from side to side. "They've worked like the Karajal since then." Silverside had seen the industrious insects called the Karajal, toiling ceaselessly through the undergrowth of the forest, building their mud colonies on the sides of trees. Kenai pointed a long finger at the periphery of the city, her lips drawn back from canines in a snarl. "See how they tear down the trees and destroy the land?" she rasped. "All this valley was forest before the walking stones came. They destroyed everything to put up their stone caves. And the light, it's as if the sun were resting down there for the night. The walking stones don't care about king or any of the living creatures. They don't care that our prey animals have fled. They don't care that their stone caves stretch out and out and out. Long before they reach back home, we will have left. We will have starved, or we will have been killed." "Do these other walking stones hurt the kin like the ones we killed?" Silverside asked. "There must be different species of walking stone down there." "We don't know," Kenai answered. "The others have never bothered us. They stay within the stones. Only the hunters ever come outside." "That also makes them like the Krajal," Life-Crier added. "Only the blue Krajal get food. Only the yellow speckled Krajali build 3 homes. Only the red Krajali defend the homes against the long tongues. They each have a separate task to do, and they're each shaped a little differently. Maybe it's the same with these walking stones. Silverside's optics focused more closely on the hive's activity. What Lifecrier had said sounded like an accurate enough metaphor. The view of the city bore that out. Certainly the walking stones seemed specialized in appearance, and though the walking stones were obviously constructed things, their hard, unyielding bodies were like the chitinous shells of insects. Maybe the enemy of the old mother had fashioned the walking stones after insects. They had the same outward silence, and their chattering inside her head to the unseen central seemed like the clickings of insects. Like the insects, they labored with seemingly untiring energy. Like the Krajal, they built their own colony home rather than take refuge in what nature afforded. And this central, perhaps that was the queen, directing all activities of the hive. The intricacy and sophistication of the city echoed in Silverside. It awoke memories of her initial urges. Find sentient life. Find humans. She'd made the decision on what was human, but the intelligence behind the walking stones. But that was the province of the gods, or so Lifecryer's tales had indicated. A god had sent the walking stones, as a god had sent Silverside herself. It felt right to admire the genius that had created the walking stones. A resonance of the third law commands that it shaped her first hours. But admiration didn't mean that the walking stones weren't enemies. Silverside had made her choice. The old mother had sent her to the kin. But still, the kin were human, yes, but Silverside yearned for something more. Sometimes the Grajal infest the place too, Lifecrier was saying. The green breeds and breeds until the trees drip with the shiny bodies. They drop on the prey animals and bite, driving them mad until they flee. They can kill a youngling, a slow and horrible death. Lifecrier closed his eyes as if remembering. The last time it happened, 2 Lifecriers ago, Aftang was the leader. During a storm, lightning struck a tree. Aftang noticed that the flame killed the Krajal and they fled. She took a branch from the tree and sent a blue Krajali on fire. The nearby Reds came to defend it, leaving an opening. So Aftang and the others took several burning brands and began using them to drive the Krajali away, until they could reach the queen and kill it. Once the queen was dead, the Krajali behaved like crazy things and were easy to kill. Walking stones won't burn. You can't burn a rock. Kenai's comment was laced with her old scorn. If she was resigned to a secondary place in the pack behind Silverside, she was also not going to submit to any of the other kin. The walking stones would laugh at the burning stick. Silverside nodded in agreement, scenting Kenai's irritation with Lifecryer's tales. Still, there is a hint in Lifecryer's story. I must find out more about these walking stones. Kenai, you will lead the pack in my absence. I will go down into the city. I need to discover if these other types of walking stones are more vulnerable than the hunters. If what I suspect is true, then the hunters will come after I attack. You must watch, see what they do, see how many they send and how quickly. Then go back to pack home quickly. I will return by another route after I have made sure that no hunters follow me. If you are not killed right away, Kenai said. Her pale eyes were non-committal, and Silverside could not tell if the prospect pleased or disturbed her. If you are right about these other walking stones. If anything happens to me, you become leader again, Silverside answered. Yes, she scented satisfaction in Kenai with that, and she continued. But it won't. I don't intend to fight the hunters. I only need to see how they react so we can plan. You can't hear them, but I can. The walking stones speak. They communicate, as do the kin. I can use their language against them. I might be able to deceive them. Greymane knew the language of the old mother, Lifecrier said. You see, Kenai, it is as I said. Kenai grimaced, but she said nothing. Watch me for the time it would take to skin a deer, Silverside told the group. Remember what you see, every detail. It is very important. then leave. Go directly back to Peckham. Silverside used Huntung to accentuate the command. Kenai grimaced again, but she nodded. As you wish. Silverside gave a soft bark of satisfaction. She looked at the pack, who watched the trio expectantly. The sight of the kin nudged a first law circuit. Keep them safe, Kenai, Silverside said. Take them back as swiftly as they can go. The hunters may come after you if I can't lead them away. I will do as Silverside wishes, Kenai answered in proud Huntung. She does not have to worry. There was nothing more to say. Silverside glanced around the edge of the forest, making sure that no hunters were lurking nearby. Swiftly she dropped onto four legs and moved out into the wash of moonlight. She was a swift, glinting presence sliding into the shadows of the nearest buildings. Silverside moved in them, among them several strides, then hunched down, belly to cool stone behind one of the structures. She listened. The walking stones chattered to Central endlessly. Reports went in, orders went out. The walking stones were concentrated more toward the Hill of Stars, where Silverside suspected Central hid, but they occasionally moved through this area. She waited, patient. When she heard the sound of a walking stone's tread, she allowed her body to deform slightly, extending an eye stalk around the corner of the building. The approaching walking stone was a spindly, gangly thing, with arms tipped by mechanical claws rather than fingered hands. It was alone. Silverside retracted the eye stalk, gathered herself. When the walking stone passed the side of the building, she leapt with a beast-hawk growl. The walking stone's arms came up too late. Silverside hit it, her jaws clamping around the thin, long neck, and her powerful muscles shaking the thing side to side. She was careful to hold her own great strength back, and use no more power than any of the kin possessed. That strength was enough, as she had suspected. These walking stones were far less durable than the hunters. A support cracked, internal wiring harnesses tore. Just before the main trunk to the brain was severed and the walking stone went still under Silverside's great bulk, she heard it call out to the distant Central. Under attack, damaged. Silverside let the thing slump to the ground. Yes, as I thought. The hunters were designed to be the city's protection. The workers were strong, but not overwhelming for a creature as powerful as the wolf creatures. The worker walking stones, at least, were vulnerable. And this also revealed another weakness. Not much of one, but it was all Silverside had. The voices in her head had gone silent. Replacing the chatter was an amplified voice, loud and commanding, resonating on all the frequencies. Central, my enemy. And it did what she would have done herself. Central was sending the hunters to investigate. Silverside didn't intend to be there when the hunters arrived. Giving a beast-hawk growl of triumph, she ran back toward the forest, staying where the kin could see her, but not heading directly toward them. Kenai would watch and make certain, then run to Peckham as ordered. Silverside would make her way there herself, but first she had to make sure there was no latent damage to the kin. She didn't matter if such delay endangered her own self. She waited until she caught a first glimpse of the first hunter, moving swiftly along the walkway toward the area where the attack had occurred. I am here, she called to it in her own head voice, using the void talk. The hunter stopped, its armored head swiveled around. Silverside gave a voice to a beast talk challenge and ran. She was just about to duck under the cover of the trees when the laser hit her. Bum, bum, bum. Well, this was an interesting chapter. Where do you think Derek crashed into? Because it said it was a cliff, which kind of sounds a bit like where Silverside slept that first night when she went to Peckham. So, I don't know. Maybe they're at Peckham. That'd be kind of funny. Also kind of dangerous. I hope you've all enjoyed and have a good day then. So, bye!